What's up, everybody? So, bad news. You're about to listen to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. That's not the bad news. The bad news is I recorded the whole thing with my camera audio, which is not what you're hearing right here. It's not the worst in the world, but it's bad enough that I'm not going to blame you if you don't stick it out. It's just kind of tinny. Sounds like you're sitting in this room with me and you're getting all the, echoes and stuff. So, I'm just going to warn you. My bad. Won't happen again. I hope you guys do enjoy the show, but if you got to skip out it, that's fine. I do ask you to hit the like button on the YouTube here real quick before you head out. And then we'll see you guys on Twitch tonight for a pretty epic stream that I'm sure a lot of you guys know about that's about to get announced on the show anyway. But enjoy if you want to. If not, we'll see you guys later. Peace.
All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Whitman, and this is sort of part two of the Divisional Round podcast recap, if you will. If you missed the first part, we uploaded Sunday morning. I encourage you to go check it out. We talked about the Saturday games and all of the coaching hirings other than the Brandon Staleys hiring that we're going to kick off this show with. So we're going to talk about Brandon Staleys. We're going to talk a little bit of Deshaun Watson. And then we are going to recap the Sunday games, and then we'll get into the mailbag. I'm not going to do the full Patreon plug here. It's in part one, but I will issue a quick reminder if you want to support the show, if you want to become a part of the show by gaining access to the mailbag and get loads of access to exclusive draft content currently up on Patreon, like my Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson film breakdowns. Head over to patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy and check it out. I also want to issue a little content schedule update. I had my structured Monday through Friday schedule for the regular season when games are going on, but now that we are into draft season and playoffs, that is changing slightly here. Not slightly, it's drastically changing to the point where I don't have a content schedule until the season really picks back up. And I need to do that so that I have the flexibility to scout, because I need to fill out about 500, 600 player evaluations. That's a pretty strenuous process. If I'm worried about a content schedule, it's just going to drive me insane. So videos will come out when I can get them out. I am hoping next week to have Monday another mock draft, now that I have the first round guys looked at a little more as of next Monday, and starting up my positional top 10 rankings. But as far as knowing when that stuff's coming exactly, I really don't have a schedule up until the season starts again, because after the draft we get into the deep dives and all that stuff. The one thing I'm hoping to maybe do consistently is mock draft Monday. Every other Monday, do a new mock draft. There might be overkill on the mock draft, so we'll see where we're at with that. But yeah, that's a content schedule update. And then I do want to announce something I'm super excited about. A lot of you have probably already seen the trailer for my next Madden rebuild that I am going to be doing here. And that is a Saints rebuild, a Saints salary cap scandal rebuild. I encourage you to check out the trailer. I won't get into it here. I know a lot of you guys are here for the football, not for the Madden stuff. But basically, long story short, is the Saints get busted for cheating the salary cap, under the table contracts, all this stuff. And the league forces a change of ownership, full release of the roster, loss of exponential amounts of draft picks, and you basically got to start from scratch and move to Oklahoma City, which is what I'm doing. And I'm really excited for that series. And I'm going to be starting that stream tonight on my Twitch. That's twitch.tv/ThatFranchiseGuy at 8 p.m. Eastern. So I will see all of you guys there. It's also a good opportunity to get in some football-related questions. It's kind of a live hangout rebuild session that is going to turn into a series on my secondary YouTube channel, TFG Plays. All right, so all of that is out of the way. Let's talk some shop, starting with the head coach hire of Brandon Staley to the LA Chargers. Staying in LA, going from the Rams as their defensive coordinator to the Chargers as their head coach. And my initial reaction to this was, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was disgusted by what the Chargers did here, and that's an aggressive term to use for a coach in Brandon Staley that I think is a really great candidate. I do think he's worthy of a head coach offer. I think he could be a top 5 defensive coach in the NFL sooner rather than later. But that's the problem with Brandon Staley, is he's a defensive head coach. And if you're the Lions or the Texans or the Eagles and you can't make this great appeal to an Arthur Smith, who they missed out on to Atlanta, to a Brian Dable, to the Bills, if you can't make that appeal and you can't get those top offensive-minded candidates, because I talked about it in part 1 of last episode, there's just so many reasons why, if you can, you should go offensive head coach. And they had Brian Dable. They had him. By all reports, Brian Dable was under the impression that he was going to be the Chargers' next head coach. He's currently coaching for the Bills, so this interview process is a little skewed. Sometimes teams are eager to sign guys and not miss out on the guys they kind of like in an effort to not risk losing the guys they really like later. But the Chargers are known for blowing these fourth quarter leads, and to me they blew their head coach vacancy here by hiring a defensive head coach. And again, guys, go back to part 1 of the podcast if you really want to see me explain why that is. But even if Brandon Staley becomes a top 5 defensive-minded head coach, well, who are the top 5 defensive head coaches in the modern NFL 2020 where offense is king? All right, Bill Belichick, kind of an outlier. I mean, he is the best defensive mind ever. He is miles better than anybody else out there from a defensive point of view. He just knows so much about the game. He is a cheat code for the defense. But even him, as the game has surpassed him, you know, they were, a decent team last year whose offense really struggled. And then this year, Tom Brady leaves, and they're a 7-win team. Their defense can't elevate, and they miss the playoffs. Okay, who else do we have? Mike Zimmer. They missed the playoffs and had one of the worst defenses in the NFL and had one of the best offenses in the league. Okay, that's not working. Who else do we have? Vic Fangio. Love Vic Fangio. Broncos haven't done jack diddly squat as their offense has been just mediocre out the bum. Who else? You do have McDermott in Buffalo. I like McDermott a lot, but they're not in the AFC Championship because of their defense. Great game last week, but let's be honest. The reason the Bills went from first-round exit last year to now AFC Championship is Brian Dable emerging as the coach he is, and I cannot explain how he's not becoming a head coach here. And I think you guys get the point. Brandon Staley could be a really nice head coach, but at best, this is going to be a B hiring. Because that's just what you're doing when you go defensive head coach. And the Chargers have been ridiculed for years and years and years for being cheap with their head coach. I can only imagine that Dable's asking price was significantly higher than Brandon Staley, who's 38 years old. He's a defensive coach. He has been a defensive coordinator for about 18 games. He's coming off, a playoff game where his defense gave up 32 points. So, is he a good coach candidate? Absolutely. I think what he did schematically for the Rams is awesome, but they had Dable in their lap, and for whatever reason, they didn't go that route. And the reports are, credible reports from like Rappaport and Schefter, this was their number 1 choice all along. So you get what you ask for, Chargers. I just don't understand it. I literally cannot understand it. There's so much evidence as to if you can do it, go offense. Get an offensive head coach, because at the end of the day, that's going to help you sustain greatness. And this was a bunt, a single, a punt. Like this was playing it safe. They'll be a good team next year. They'll keep some of their offensive staff, and maybe Pep Hamilton is the guy who steps in as offensive coordinator. We'll see what they do there. The thing is, they could come in and get a good offensive coordinator, and they could have success on offense next year with Justin Herbert. But that guy's going to leave. That guy's going to go be a head coach somewhere else. So I really cannot get excited about this hiring. This was probably the head coach hiring that had the most immediate opportunity for high-level success next year. I really do think that Brian Dable here would have made the Chargers a Super Bowl contender next year. Whereas Brandon Staley, they could have a top 5 defense next year. But do I think Pep Hamilton's going to come in and turn Justin Herbert and a bad offensive line? And I like their receiving group. But do I think whoever they go for offensive coordinator here is going to come in and make this an elite offense like it could have been with Brian Daboll? No, I really don't. And the other side of this is this defense was going to be great with or without Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley runs a different scheme here. He ran a 3-4 scheme for the Rams. For the most part, he ran some multiple, but what he got hired for, the scheme he got fired for, was hired for, I want to make sure I didn't say fired, was the 3-4 Rams defense. With Leonard Floyd and these athletic edge rushers that can kind of do some hybrid stuff. Now all of a sudden, your best player, Joey Bosa, is a tweener in your scheme. He's not going to thrive as a 3 technique. He's not going to thrive as an edge outside linebacker. So you're either changing Staley's scheme that he got hired for after running it for 18 games, or you're diminishing the talents of your best player. I just don't get the hire, really at all. I don't think this is going to be a bad coach. And that's even worse because they could be a 10 to 12 win team and win a couple playoff games here or there, and they never fire the guy, and they're never great. They're never great. Does anybody here want to be great? Jets go defensive coach. The Jags go with the safe hire of Urban Meyer. The Lions didn't push for Brian Daboll. The Chargers here go defensive coach. It's just all these are all right, fine. But especially in the Chargers shoe days, they had Brian Daboll in their lap. And right now, the Atlanta Falcons are the only team that's made an A hire to me with Arthur Smith, because they understand that this is all about offense. The Falcons saw this happen to them, and they don't want it to happen again. They kept Dan Quinn over Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan left, and they sucked for 3 years because their defensive coach couldn't elevate a roster. Because let's be real here. The reason that Brandon Staley's defense was number 1 in the league, yeah, he's a good defensive coach, but he's also got Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, and a bunch of other talent there. The reason Mike Zimmer's defense, who is to me the second best defensive mind in the NFL, was one of the worst in the league, was his D-line fell apart and he had a young secondary. So let's not kid ourselves. The defense is at least, 60% personnel, if not 80 to 90% personnel. Schematically, there's only so much unique things you can do defensively to elevate and bring things to the table. Staley could be the most creative defensive mind in the league, and he's not even doing that much different from anybody else. But because the personnel is in place, they might be a great defense. But this was going to be a good defense with or without Brandon Staley. You have Herbert, a young quarterback who is awesome right now and has the potential to be an elite quarterback with the correct development. Picture what happened with Josh Allen for Justin Herbert. And Herbert is well ahead of the game of what Allen was after his rookie year. So I just can't get excited about this hiring. Contextually, I would give it a C- or a D because they butchered it. They had Brian Daboll. I just don't get it, man. I just don't get it. They'll probably win 10 games next year and be a really good defense, and everyone's going to be like, you hated this hire. Yeah, but are they going to win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years? We'll see. I think their chances of winning a Super Bowl with Brian Daboll are through the roof, and with a defensive head coach, they're diminished. So there's the spiel. I'm sorry to be a Debbie Downer on the Chargers, but I really think they blew it. So let's talk about Deshaun Watson for a little bit. There's really not much I can say that adds to what your ESPN, NFL networks are talking about. I'm sure you're either hearing people talk about playoffs or Deshaun Watson. He's unhappy in Houston. Ownership told him, we want to include you. We want your feedback on our GM and coach hiring, and reports are that they went and hired the GM without consulting him, and he's pissed. And he's like, I want to get traded. Well, this is a really complex situation because he just signed a massive contract, which makes it extremely difficult on the Texans because if they were to trade him, they basically have to, about half pay his salary to play for someone else. So the compensation they need to get to justify this thing is through the roofs, let alone the fact that he is probably, let's just say, a top 5 asset in the NFL. I think, obviously, Mahomes is above him. You could probably debate, you're not putting Burrow above him. You could debate Trevor Lawrence, but I think you're taking Watson over Trevor Lawrence. It's not Lamar, not even close. So probably the second best asset in the NFL because of his age and the fact that he's a top 5 quarterback. Josh Allen, potentially ahead of Deshaun Watson. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Maybe Russell Wilson, but I would rather get Watson. So he's this crazy asset, a player in his prime at his age has at quarterback, who's an elite quarterback more or less, has never become available. So there's no precedent for the value of this trade. There's just so many moving pieces, quite literally, when you want to talk about a trade. So I'll just break this into 2 parts. Do I think he gets traded? No, I don't. I think that as soon as the coach gets hired here, he'll have a conversation with Deshaun Watson and they'll figure it out. That is what I think happens, but I don't think that's a lock. I think that's maybe 60% that route, 40% they just work out a trade here. So I'm going to say 60% no, they don't trade him, 40% yes, which is crazy to think that there's a 40% chance that he does get traded. And then who has the best chance to make this deal? A lot of these trade offers that were getting floated out for Watson were preposterously small. Less than the compensation that the Rams gave up for Jalen Ramsey, or less than the Seahawks gave up for Jamal Adams, which you got to take the value that they did there and at least double it, if not triple/quadruple it. I don't think people realize how much you have to put on the Texans' plate to get them to even think about this thing. You're talking about, as a baseline, 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and an elite player to start the conversation. Because the Texans, people say the Texans don't have any leverage here. The Texans absolutely have leverage. Yes, Deshaun might want out, but as long as the Texans play this right, they're going to get all of these offers. And if they let it marinate just a little bit, unlike the Raiders did with Khalil Mack when they just traded him overnight, if they let this marinate for a week, these offers are going to stack up and up and up. And while they might not have leverage with Deshaun, they can leverage all these other trade offers against the people they're negotiating with, because the market is that big. The invisible hand, right? Supply and demand. People want an elite quarterback, and they're going to come calling at least 7 or 8 teams. And then to sell it to the Texans' point of view, they need to, A, make sure that they're getting a great value, but B, they need to then be in a position where they can go and get a quarterback somehow. So there's only so many teams that have the capital to make that. And there's a few teams I'll just rule out. Like the Giants, I don't think they can make a deal for this because Daniel Jones is not someone you trade for. He's a player that the Giants are trying to figure out if he's a franchise player. Same thing with Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater for the Panthers. That's not really an asset for the Texans. The Texans, who are entering a rebuild if they trade Deshaun Watson, there's no benefit in getting something like that, especially if you're not getting an elite player. And in the Giants' case and the Broncos' case, you can't offer Bradley Chubb and maybe Saquon Barkley. I don't think the Texans would trade for a running back again. But I just think Giants and Broncos, I'm ruling them out. Panthers are interesting. I do think you'd have to include Brian Burns. You'd have to include your, the 3 first rounders and the 3 second rounders, and probably Teddy Bridgewater. And then maybe they think about that. So they might be the 5th team, but there's really 3 teams that make the most sense to me. And that would be, number 1, the New York Jets, where you're offering Sam Darnold, the 2nd pick, the 20th pick, or whatever they have, your first round next year, your first round, not the Seahawks' first round, and then your 2nd round pick this year and next year. So you're offering Darnold, 3 first round picks, and actually you probably only need 1 second round pick in that scenario. So then the Texans they have Darnold, they have the second overall pick. You're in a situation where you get other capital and you have quarterback assets, whether it's Darnold or you have that number 2 pick to maybe take Zach Wilson, and then maybe you package Darnold to somewhere else. But the Jets, I would say, number 1 best case to trade for Deshaun Watson. And then number 2 is the Miami Dolphins, who are in a very similar situation. Just depends on what the Texans think of Tua. Because if you get that 3rd pick, then you're ending up with the 3rd best quarterback in this class. And just the way I look at it, Zach Wilson is miles ahead of Fields and Trey Lance. So I would rather, if I'm in the Dolphins' shoes, I'd actually just stick with Tua and do something else with that 3rd pick. That's just kind of where I'm sitting. But the combination of Darnold and Wilson is just a much better appeal, in my opinion, than Tua and the 3rd pick. So again, you're looking at Tua, the 3rd pick, the 20th pick, or whatever they have from the Jags, your 1st round next year, and then probably 2 second-round picks. So you're looking at quarterback assets and a boatload of picks, 2 teams that have 2 top 20 picks and a top 3 pick for each of those teams. So the Jets and Dolphins makes sense. And then the 49ers, I do think, can make a case if they're willing to include Nick Bosa, which 49ers fans may or may not be willing to do that. But if you include Bosa, Jimmy Garoppolo, who you're not going to need if you get Watson, and you include the 12th pick or whatever you have, a 1st round next year and your 2nd round this year, yeah, I think that actually might make some sense for the Texans. Now, this is all under the situation where they feel like they have to trade Watson. But to me, those are the 3 teams that can put together realistic packages that don't destroy their teams to go get Deshaun Watson. Because everyone else, you probably can't even make an appeal. Like I said, like the Broncos, the Giants, like if I'm the Texans and you offer me 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and I don't know, Bradley Chubb or Evan Ingram or what, like you're not getting a Nick Bosa caliber player back. I can't justify that because you just aren't in a good position to go get an elite quarterback, whereas the other offers, you're at least getting fair compensation and competent quarterback play one way or another. So now that that's done, let's round up these games, and I'm going to be honest, I don't have any major takeaways from this game. Maybe I'm just being lazy, but both these games went pretty much as I expected. But let's just talk about my reactions, I suppose. So the Chiefs, I will say the idea that I've been selling that they were going to come out and start slow because they've taken 2 weeks off, I think there's still plenty of evidence to support that can hurt you. But in this case, the Chiefs put a tally on the other side because they came out hot. They were rocking and rolling. And frankly, if Mahomes doesn't leave in the second half with a concussion, this game was never all that close. From the Browns' perspective, I really just don't even have anything else to add on the Chiefs. Like they're such a great team. When they are at their best, no one's going to beat them because their defense actually happens to be pretty damn competent. And they obviously have the best offense in the NFL. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce were uncoverable in this game. Mahomes was unconscious. Whoa, can't say that. Mahomes was outstanding in this game before the concussion. Don't cancel me. That was not intended, although kind of funny. But yeah, man, the Chiefs are just insane. I don't see them losing to the Bills, which I'm not going to preview the games because those predictions are in place. This was my Final Four, my playoff predictions, so nothing has really changed there. But anyway, Chiefs are awesome. Tyrann Mathieu made some plays, and they showed up. They were the better team than the Browns. But from the Browns' perspective, I think you're super optimistic for next year because you're getting Odell Beckham back. Everyone's talking about who are the Browns going to draft? Who are they going to get at receiver? Well, they're getting Odell back. I don't think there's much question there. You just bring him back with Jarvis, and you got Hooper. These 2 running backs are coming back. You got your offense ready to go next year. Sure, you could maybe add I don't know, a fourth receiver, but you also have Donovan Peoples-Jones who stepped up. So I'm actually very content with the Browns' offense. I would go defense for the Browns, try to make this a more competent defense, build around Myles Garrett a little more. And all of a sudden, the Browns, I think, can be a Super Bowl team next year if they do a couple things right this offseason. And Baker was awesome throughout the playoffs. I thought he was going into the end of December and all that. He was really taking strides. He just has that championship energy about him. He makes plays on third down. He plays well in rhythm. He's accurate. He's got the arm talent. He extends plays. He looks like a potentially elite quarterback if he's playing like this. I know he had the one interception, but Aaron Rodgers had 2 turnover-worthy plays. Tom Brady was throwing some picks. You know what happens? Playoff football is damn hard. It was a great play by Tyrann Mathieu and a throw that Baker Mayfield shouldn't be making. But other than the one throw to Tyrann Mathieu, I thought Baker was awesome in this game. And Jarvis let the team down. He did not play well. I really think with Baker and this unit, they can take another step forward next year. This was a huge step forward. They accomplished more than anyone thought they would this year, but they're set up really well, I think, next year to be their window. They still have Baker on that last deal, last year of his rookie contract, I should say. Then the 5th-year option kicks in, but if he's this good again, they'll pay him. But this 4th year of Baker's career, I think they have kind of Super Bowl sleeper upside, I suppose. And maybe I should sneak in there and get a little bet in now, because they'll probably be like 25-1. They'll probably be like in that 10 to 12 range of likelihood. But I just thought that the quarterback play was great down the stretch. The offensive line, you're super excited about. The coach, Kevin Stefanski. Don't sleep on the whole year 2 of a system thing as well. I do think there's something to be said about taking time, especially in this system. We've seen it in lots of different spots. Jimmy Garoppolo taking some time with the Niners, Matt Ryan with Kyle Shanahan, Aaron Rodgers with this system in Green Bay. It can take some time. Kirk Cousins really has taken steps up as he's been in the system for longer. So I just think you're super excited about the Browns for the future. And you fell short and you had some misfortune in this game. You couldn't come up with the stop at the end. But I don't think this is a loss that's going to hang on the Browns fans for all that long, because you weren't supposed to win the Super Bowl this year anyway. You got further than anyone expected. And next year can really have legitimate expectations. And then for the Saints and the Bucks, this was kind of a tough game to watch from the Saints' perspective. I did pick the Bucks to win this game, and it was for the exact reasons that we saw, and that is that it's just been a rough run of playoffs for Drew Brees. And you see it time and time again, come January, come December, that he just doesn't have it anymore. And I don't know if he officially announced his retirement yet or not, but it's clear that that's what's going to happen here. You can't go with him again. Saints defense, their line play in general is just insane. This roster was just stupid good, but unfortunately they couldn't get enough life out of Drew Brees to milk this championship window down to the core, really. And now the Saints are entering an interesting state. This is unlike most transitions, really any transition we've seen, because like in the Patriots case, like their roster was kind of not ready with Tom Brady leaving, or say the Chargers letting Phillip Rivers leave. Like some of these teams, like they lose their quarterback, but it was kind of the end of their window anyway. With the Saints, like this team is really intact, and they have they have these crazy cap issues, but the cap doesn't exist in New Orleans. They're probably going to push, if they wanted to, they could keep pushing this thing down the road, but it's just so clear that the Saints, Drew Brees, it's not going to happen. So now the question becomes, what do you do? Do you try to keep milking this thing and kicking the can down the road? Because as much as we talk about it, at some point the Saints are going to have to pay for this, right? And what I'm talking about is they are quite literally kicking the salary cap down the road. They keep doing contracts, moving bonuses up. paying in cash, and what that does is kicks the salary cap into future seasons to the point that next year they're slated to be $95 million over the cap without a quarterback. And it's been that way for them for a couple of years now, and it never seems to, they never seem to have to pay the piper on it. In theory, they should have to do that. So do we really see this team blow everything up? And what does that mean? I think it means, obviously Kamara and Thomas aren't going anywhere. And then I look at, Ryan Ramczyk is a player that you can't lose. He's young. He's one of the best tackles in football. You have your center in Eric McCoy. He's cheap. You got a guard in McCoy. And then other than that, everything else is pretty much expendable to me if you're going to go with a sort of rebuild approach. And maybe Sean Payton tears this thing down, goes with Taysom Hill next year, and maybe we really do see the Saints let this roster fall apart. They hit rock bottom. They get a top 3 pick next year. They get a young quarterback. And then 2, 3, 4 years from now, we see Sean Payton with a new quarterback kind of on his last legs. That's one route. Another route is, they make an appeal to Phillip Rivers. Or maybe they bring Jameis Winston back. And maybe they do kick these contracts down the road again and try to keep this team intact. I don't know. They have so many avenues that they could go with, and luckily for them, they have literal magic that they can use to basically ignore the salary cap seemingly for as long as they want. I'm very intrigued, A, what they do, and B, if this salary cap hell that is supposed to exist actually comes for them. Because it's inexplicable. It is inexplicable. We sit here today and say they're supposed to be $90 million over the cap next year. They should be releasing players, trading players off, bargaining guys down. It's been that way for 2 or 3 years. And nothing has happened. So I kind of understand it, but I don't understand it at Mickey Loomis's level. So I'm intrigued. Which direction do they go? And do they actually have to pay the piper on this contract situation, or are they going to find another way around this? It's a very intriguing offseason. And then for the Bucs, they're hitting their stride. And Tom Brady was pretty good in this game. He had some bad mistakes. He was kind of what you probably expected from him in the playoffs, of like what we've seen recently, where he can make some really good throws. I think, whatever you've said about the arm talent, right now he's throwing dimes. But he also doesn't have the exact same mental edge that he had in, say, Josh McDaniels' system, where he was there for 10 years. He still processes coverages at a very high level, but just the surgical passing game, it's just not there. And mistakes are going to show up. You're going to get miscommunications with receivers. You're going to get him pressing a little bit, throwing the ball where he thinks a receiver is going to be, and it's just not the timing and the practice. Against, if you're running this route combination against this coverage, he sees it one way, Mike Evans sees it another, and you get picks. And we've seen that throughout the year, and I think that's going to continue to plague him. It just his play style with Bruce Arians' offense in a first year in a new system. I think it was just inevitable. But Brady's been awesome, top 10 quarterback. I'll just say that. And then this roster is insane. The offensive line is dominant. They went up against one of the best pass rushes in the league and held their own. The run game was pretty good because of the offensive line. Even Leonard Fournette was okay in this game. These receivers, this receiving core is absurd, dude. You have Godwin, Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, and Gronk, who's getting back to form. He's a good tight end. He's been probably a top 10 tight end for the second half of the season. And then you lose Antonio Brown to an injury. Oh, well, you still got Scotty Miller, who would start for a lot of teams, and Tyler Johnson, who never should have been available in the 5th round, was a 3rd round at worst. Great route runner, smooth hands, easily can step in and play in a pinch. So they're 5 deep at receiver. Cameron Brate was making plays here. They were supposed to be 3 deep at tight end, but O.J. Howard is out. Their offensive line is top 5 in the league, and, you got Tom Brady. So the offense is just stupid loaded, and defensively, these defensive backs are awesome. Sean Murphy-Bunting was great in this game. Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, my boy Antoine Winfield popping a fumble out here. Devin White and Levante David both made awesome plays in the second half. Devin White was everywhere. This pass rush is pretty good. They're going to get Vita Vea back this week. Like, what I'm getting at here is I've heard multiple people say, which is just stupid, like, but they've said that Tom Brady winning outside of New England would cement him as the GOAT. And, I mean, you either believe that rings can make you the greatest of all time or you don't. Him getting another one is not going to change whether he was the GOAT or not. But, I mean, he left a much worse team, Bill Belichick or not. This Bucs roster is stupid good. Like, Tom Brady saw this and was like, hold on. Top 5 offensive line, top 1 playmaking group, awesome defense. Yeah, I'm gonna go play for that team. I get to play in Florida, warm weather. Most of my division rivals play in a dome. Yeah, that sounds pretty good down there in Florida. No brainer there. So, I mean, Tom Brady, like, great business decision on his end, but is it like, did he go and take the Bucs to the NFC Championship? In a lot of ways, yes, but I mean, come on. This roster is just insanely loaded, and great decision by Tom Brady to go there. But there's like this narrative that, well, now he's out of New England. He went and took the Tampa Bay Bucs to the NFC Championship, maybe the Super Bowl. Like, wow, how impressive. Yeah, it was an impressive year, but like, this roster is stupid good. I think Philip Rivers could have come here and taken this team as far as they've gone. So, I don't know. This Bucs team is really impressive. I think they're scary. I still think they have a really good chance of beating the Packers on next week, just because their team is just better. Like, their overall team is better. Now, Rodgers is playing out of his mind, and they have more chemistry as a team in Green Bay, and it's in Lambeau, so it's going to be really close. I don't think this will be a blowout like it was the first time. Probably going to come down to whose defense plays better. Who makes some plays in the fourth quarter, and could be a game where whoever runs the ball better plays a big factor as well. But there's your game recaps. Let's go ahead and get into the mailbag. So we actually have a ton of questions from the last week. A lot of people have signed up lately on Patreon. I really appreciate you guys. So again, I am only going to open up these messages that lead with mailbag questions. So then, if you don't have a mailbag question, I can come back and actually get back to your other questions that are not meant for the podcast. All right, so from Ethan, if you're the Raiders, do you consider picking a quarterback in the first round, or is defense too big of a need? If Lance or Fields are there, I think you think about it. I don't think you take Mac Jones. Like, Mac Jones isn't going to come in and be an upgrade to Derek Carr. But yeah, Raiders probably just going best player available on defense is a pretty easy mock selection there. All right, from Logan Meyer. At this point, do you think the Jags can go from worst to first in the AFC South next year? That's a good point, because Houston's a mess. The Titans are losing Arthur Smith. And the Colts have Costanzo retiring. T.Y. Hilton's likely going to go, and Rivers. So I would still take the Colts as the favorite there, but... And if the Texans keep Deshaun Watson, I like them. And the Titans are probably still going to be competent, but it's definitely close. I still think the Jaguars' defense is freaking miserable. And Trevor Lawrence, I think he's going to be good, but I don't know if he's going to step in day one and like be the best quarterback in that division. He's a good chance to do that, but I think there are some flaws to Trevor Lawrence's game. There is some growth he needs to do at the next level before he gets to that kind of level where he can step in and take a bad team to first place right away. I would say they have a much better chance next year than they did this year, though. I would say they have like a 20% chance at the division. All right, from Ty. Might the Bucs take Trask or Mac Jones in the draft? I could see if Mac Jones is there at the very end of the first, maybe. But I really think with the Bucks situation, they're not too worried about 2022 or 2023. I think they're just going to roll this thing with Tom Brady and the guys they got right there, and I think that Bruce Arians will retire with Tom Brady, and then they'll just blow it all up. And I really don't think that they're going to be thinking about another quarterback, especially those guys that don't have a lot of upside. So I'm going to say no on that one. Eric Halverson asks, he's going to clarify. I was thinking about this. He asked last week if I could explain why Brandon Staleys' defense is not two-gapping, and I thought about it more after the fact. I think I understood what you were asking, Eric, but let's see what your detailed question is here. So his original question is, why is Brandon Staleys' defense not two-gapping? And what he means is people say it's not two-gapping, but then go on to describe what sounds like a two-gapping defense. Can you explain that? So I thought a little more about this, and the way I understand what you're asking is, like, do they use a two-gapping player? It is kind of the way I'm looking at this. And again, I could be misinterpreting this, but two-gapping typically means a nose tackle that you're going to line up on head up on a player. And it doesn't have to be a nose tackle, but I think every scheme uses two techniques, uses four techniques, which is our head up techniques. Or actually 5 technique, and 1, 3, and 5 are your head up techniques. No. 0, 2. I should know this. 0, 2, and 4. I was right the first time. I talked myself out of it. 0, 2, and 4 means you are head up on your assignment. So if you're a 0 technique, you are a true nose tackle. You are lining up right in front of the center. And that means your two gaps in that situation are both A gaps. And if you line up on the guard, you have the A gap and the B gap. If you line up on the tackle, you got the B gap and the C gap. But the way I understand this question is, do they use a traditional nose tackle that you ask to dominate both A gaps? And no, they really are not that scheme, because they have Aaron Donald in there. They play him in a 3-tech, and then they're going to probably play their biggest defensive tackle as more of a shade technique. And just schematically, you aren't asking that traditional massive block lane holder to take care of both A gaps. So you're getting pretty nitty gritty there. And honestly, I know my X's and O's, but there's people that know their X's and O's a lot more. I've never been a coach. I've never played defensive tackle. So there's other people that could answer that question probably a little better than me. But like, for example, like Kenny Clark will play straight up on the center. Your Damon Harrisons of the world will play straight up and be asked to hold and control 2 different gaps. Whereas other defenses will be like, that's asking a lot of a player. We're going to scheme this up so that everyone kind of has a hole, has a lane, has a hole. That's more like, Bill Belichick does that really well, where he makes sure every single gap has someone responsible for it. But again, I hope I answered your question, or at least got the ball rolling on that. All right, from Scott Nance, would you rank the best wide receivers as prospects? Could I rank the best wide receivers over the last 2 seasons as prospects? Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, Jefferson, Chase, Smith, and Waddle. I will go Chase 1. And this is as prospects, not 2020, not what we know about them now. This is based on my grades coming out. Chase would be 1. I think Judy would be 2, slightly above Devontae Smith. Very similar players. And then Lamb would be 4. Ruggs and Waddle. Ruggs would probably be 5, Waddle 6, and Justin Jefferson 7 as prospects, all with like top, 20 grades on them, top 20 players in the class as their grades. From Michael White, recently started getting into football, was wondering what the best path to begin analyzing the game like you do would be. Like, how should one start off watching film, breaking down certain players, etc.? What should I be focusing on in the beginning? Yeah, that's a great question. Hard to answer because there's so many ways to get into that kind of stuff. What the very first thing I did when I kind of started this channel is just starting the Madden roster. I watched a team's season like I was watching a season of someone on Netflix. And that worked for me to kind of understand just from a baseline of like, what does one team do like well? Like what is their scheme? What kind of players fit their scheme? And then you do another team and you start to see things. You start to see like, all right, this 3-4 outside linebacker does, drop into coverage. He'll bend around the edge. Kind of reminds me of this player on this other. I just think that when you really focus in on one team and understand one team really well, you can kind of start to stem all these things into what a lot of, NFL experts call buckets. And buckets are kind of, you call it scheme fits, call it certain concepts from a play calling perspective, call it buckets of traits. I think when you start to see the game really well, you start to sort of blend everything together so that you see one thing here and you remember it looking like something you saw over here and you're like, okay, that worked there, it should work here. And again, this is very complicated. I'm probably not making any sense. But to me, the NFL Game Pass subscription, I took all summer. I think I rewatched the entire Patriots season. I think I did the Panthers, which was like their Super Bowl run, the Broncos that year, to see what they're doing from a defense perspective. But that's a good starting point. And then if you're looking for like a good job opportunity, I would recommend you can apply pff.com/jobs. Is a great opportunity to get into the industry because it's all self-taught, and if you pass the lessons that they, you have to teach yourself how to do the job. But if you pass the test, you're probably going to get the job. So I would say that's a great platform. Also, another opportunity is there's all these sites like fansided.com. I used to write for Fansided way back when, in like 2014. Be willing to work for free and just kind of get your name out there is another suggestion. From Rory Akurin. I'm a Lions fan. I was wondering if you think the Lions should replenish the wide receiver room or fix the awful defense with their first round pick. If you had the pick of wide receivers, who would you pick for the Lions? Hopefully they get it together and extend Galladay. I mean, yeah, they have to extend Galladay. They have nobody else after Galladay. It's a huge need. I've been mocking them Jalen Waddle. If Devontae Smith is there, that'd be great. I don't see Jamar Chase being there with their pick. I think he goes before then, but you never know. He could be there. Any of these guys. I mean, they're all fantastic. I love the fit, though, frankly, of Waddle's deep threat ability with, Galladay on one side and Matthew Stafford doing the things he does. I love that fit. So I think the Lions trading down and getting Waddle at like 10, 11, 12 would be such a good move for them. And then you can use some of those extra picks to build up the defense. J-Mac looking for a Trey Lance film breakdown. I will be doing that this week, I think. I'll probably do Fields this week and Lance next week. From Brandon, my dude. I saw you say some not so terrible words about Mac Jones. Was wondering if he'd be a good fit for Indy, if he'd be available in that spot. I think that's that's an option if Rivers retires. If you're not bringing Rivers back, then yeah, I think so. He's not an upgrade to Rivers, but he's similar. And the way I look at Mac Jones is low upside pick. Best case, you're getting, probably Kirk Cousins. Not a perfect comparison. I like the way Mac Jones moves in the pocket. I think his pocket sense is much better than Kirk, but I don't know if he's as accurate or has as strong of an arm. But, you're getting that system quarterback that can step in, ready to play day one. He needs an offensive line. That's the biggest thing. So you're looking at teams that need a low-end starter that want to win right now, that have an offensive line. So you're looking at Indianapolis, Washington, New England, maybe. 15's a little rich for Mac Jones, I think, but could maybe pull the trigger there. New Orleans could go that route. And then, like Indianapolis and Pittsburgh, if they're not having their quarterbacks back next year, would make sense. But I don't think he's an upgrade in 2020 to Philip Rivers. WG asks, is this for the Patreon mailbag? Yes. Let me just respond to that real quick so that you make sure you get that. From Parker, what should the Lions do with Stafford? I've talked about Stafford in the past. I wouldn't trade him. You're not getting a top quarterback in this draft. Maybe you could draft Trey Lance and develop him behind Stafford, but I would just keep the ball rolling with Stafford. He's not the ideal quarterback, but he's pretty damn good, and I know you can win a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. And if you trade him, you're probably selling too low. I mean, if the Niners come to you with like Jimmy Garoppolo and their first-round pick this year and next year, maybe you think about it. But overall, I'm probably not moving on from Stafford. I'm just going to try to build around him. From Loomer, what do all the definitions mean for a front seven? Choose any scheme you want. Please explain Mike linebacker, 3-tech, etc. Okay. More X's and O's questions. This one I feel much more comfortable answering than the two-gapping question. So you have, on the defensive line, you will hear technique. You're asking what a 3-tech is. So you'll hear what a technique is. And you can, as I'm talking here, I would suggest Google football front seven technique chart. And you can see as I'm talking here, but you start over the center is a 0, and then every gap is you add 1 working outwards. So if you're over the center, you're a 0 technique. If you are an inside shade of the guard in the center, you're a 1 technique. Now this is where it gets a little complicated because so you got your 0s over the center. Let's just stay on one side to keep it simplified because it's identical on both sides, just on the right side and the left side. So 0 technique is over the center. If you take a little step and you're an outside shade of the center, you are now a 1 technique. Now, if you take another step, you don't become a 2 technique quite yet because there's what's called a 2I technique. If you are an inside shade of the guard, you are then a 2I. And then if you're head up on the guard, you're a 2 technique. Again, if you're an outside shade of the guard, you're a 2I. If you're an inside shade of the tackle, you're a 3 technique. Head up on the tackle is a 4 technique, 5 outside the tackle. And then it goes all the way out to a 9 technique. Basically, if you were to place tight ends there, so you can, if there's 2 tight ends on one side of the formation and you're lined up outside of the second tight end, you are then a 9 technique. Now there doesn't have to be a tight end there. You will hear quite often referred to as a wide 9 technique. The 49ers did a lot of this in 2019, and that is when you have your edge rushers way the heck outside. And that is to kind of spread out the offensive line, cause some confusion, create more space there for your athletes. So when you hear the term wide 9 defense, both of your edge players are out in 9 techniques, which is like way outside of the tackle, even if their hands in the dirt. So that's your defensive line. And keep in mind, 3-4 outside linebackers and 4-3 defensive ends are both considered defensive line positions. So even if you run a 3-4 defense, as long as you're within 1.5 yards of the line of scrimmage, you're considered, say Von Miller will line up as a 5 technique almost all the time, even if his hand is not in the dirt. So everything within a 1.5 yards of the line of scrimmage is a technique. It's a, defensive line position. So when you hear, you'll hear 3-tech all the time is a very common thing people say, and not everyone fully understands what that means. A 3-tech is Aaron Donald. You're going to line up between the guard and the tackle, and you are traditionally not your typical plotting nose tackle. You're responsible for that gap in run defense, but you can do a lot as a 3 technique as a pass rusher, especially if you're a good athlete like Aaron Donald, Grady Jarrett, for example. You can take your guard, drive him back. You can run stunts. You can loop in and go over the center. You can drive out, try to draw the tackle as the edge rusher loops in is a very common, schemed up pass rush. Is if you're that 3-tech, you slant outside, you try to draw the guard and the tackle's attention as that edge player loops back in. So a 3-tech is kind of a pass rushing, not specialist, but typically when you refer to a player as he is best used as a 3-tech, it means he'll be a decent run defender on the interior. He's not going to get bullied, whatever. But he's not a nose tackle. He's not big enough to line up and take on double teams in the middle against the run. But you put him at a 3-tech. He's a decent run defender, and you can do some nice stuff with him as a pass rusher. So then you have the linebackers, which nowadays your Mike and Will linebackers, it's a bit of a dying breed depending on who you ask, because everyone's nickel defense these days, right? Nickel is the new base, if you've heard that. So base defense is either base 4-3, where you have 4 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers, or the 3-4 defense, which I know we're getting real football meathead here, but a 3-4 defense is really a 5-2 defense as a base defense, because like we said, those outside linebackers are really defensive linemen. They just drop into coverage a little more. But anyway, a 5-2 or a 3-4 defense is going to be your 5 guys up front with 3 big defensive tackles, 2 edge players, and 2 linebackers. But anyway, those are base defenses. Nickel defense, whether you're a 3-4 team or a 4-3 team, pretty much the same. A nickel defense or a base nickel defense, because there's all these different types of nickels that people are running these days, but base nickel is a 4-2 defense with 2 defensive tackles, 2 edge rushers, and 2 linebackers. And when you're in that position, your Mike linebacker, both of your linebackers are kind of Mikes. They're both Mikes and they're both Wills. You got to kind of, with all this misdirection now, especially, both of those guys play pretty much the same position as linebackers. They're going to line up off the ball, in between the tackles. Now, and that's the same in a 3-4 defense, is the 2 linebackers are very indistinguishable. Now, the one situation where Mike will come into account, and there's Sam linebackers as well, is a base 4-3 defense, which is not dead. You do still see base 4-3 defenses. Teams like the Raiders, the Seahawks, especially run a lot of base 4-3. Brandon Staley actually runs some base 4-3. It's not dead. It's just not as common as it used to be in 2005. That's where your Mike, Will, and Sam really comes into play. So Mike, it's M for middle linebacker. S is Sam for strong side linebacker, and Will is W for weak side linebacker. So your Mike is your typical off-ball linebacker, usually a bigger sized guy that can thump in the middle, not necessarily a great coverage player, but a good run defending middle linebacker. Your Sam traditionally is, again, a bigger linebacker. A lot of times these teams are running over-under looks where that strong side linebacker is going to kind of stack one side and actually play up right on the line of scrimmage like a 3-4 outside linebacker would. And they'll actually play right up on the line of scrimmage. So you want to be bigger if you're that traditional strong side linebacker. That's like Jamie Collins is a great example of that role. Donta Hightower does a lot of that too. And then Will is a weak side linebacker. So weak side linebacker, think of like Deion Jones or Jerome Baker. These are guys you don't want thumping in the middle. They're going to play away from the strong side of the formation, which means they are unlikely to be getting matched up with a tight end, a tackle. If they're getting blocked, it's probably a slot receiver. And if they're in coverage, they're probably covering a slot receiver or a running back. So your weak side linebacker is more of a speedy guy who has that backside pursuit that's going to fly to the ball if he's going, and he's not getting blocked if he's going to the way the run is going. And then if they're kind of running a counter play back to them or some misdirection, the thinking is that they're still going to have favorable matchups. So there is your front seven breakdown. That was real deep. But we're doing pretty good here. We got about 6 questions left. What's my opinion on the fumbling the ball out of the end zone? I don't love it. I'm not like everyone else where I think it's the worst rule in football. I still think overtime rules are the worst rule in football. I see it both ways. Sam Monson of PFF had a great argument for why it makes sense because from an offensive perspective, all you have to do is break the plane to score a touchdown. You don't have to get 2 feet into the end zone or, hell, you don't have to hold on to the football or get tackled into the end zone. All you have to do is, stick your hand out over the end zone to score a touchdown. So I understand from the other point of view of like, if you're able to, control the sideline and force them to try to dive for the pylon, I do think there should be some risk involved in that. I saw a tweet from Jason McCourty who was saying anyone that's played for Bill Belichick is trembling right now seeing that guy reach out for the end zone because it's something you can coach, right? If you're going to reach out for the end zone, understand the risk of it. I don't think it's the worst rule in the world. I think you could make a strong case that the defense didn't earn that ball either. Maybe they should move the ball back to the 20 or the 30-yard line, but that's a little silly. I mean, either way, it's kind of silly. I understand both ways. I actually don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. Everything leans offense in this league, so it's kind of nice to have one rule that leans defense that is actually in the offensive control. You don't have to stick your hand out to try and that's always the case. It's a guy about to get tackled and he's trying to do a little too much, reaching that ball out. Defense is almost always in position to get a stop in that situation. So I don't know. I don't stand on the worst rule in football on that one. I could see it either way. From Jonah, why have most prized openings filled before Dable? So this is a weird situation. I think it's unique in that Dable has actually said that he's not going to just go anywhere. He loves it in Buffalo. I think he's originally from Buffalo, and I think he's waiting on an opportunity that is going to benefit him. And I do think he was going to go to the Chargers. I really do. But he didn't want to go to the Lions or the Falcons. Those aren't the most appealing situations. Texans and Eagles are a wreck. The Jags were all in on Urban Meyer from day one. And, the Chargers went with Brandon Staley. So I think the Jags and Chargers, to me, are just making bad decisions. And the other teams, I think, wanted him. I think, the Falcons preferred Arthur Smith. That's fine. I like Dable and Smith. I think both are great hires. I think the Eagles and Texans would love to get Brian Dable, but I think Dable's saying no on that one. So I think it's a unique situation where Dable is actually such a good candidate that in a lot of situations he's able to just kind of wait this thing out. I don't think all of a sudden we're seeing this mentality shift away from hiring offensive minds. I think just a couple examples of few organizations doing crazy things. From Devontae Rivera, Mahomes is probably going to win the Super Bowl. With Kelsey and Hill on contracts, they don't seem to be slowing down. How long do you think it will take for Mahomes to enter the GOAT conversation? 2023, 2024. I mean, he's probably the most, not accomplished, most just best court, like in his prime. I think you're going to be able to make a case that he's actually better than Rodgers was in his prime, who in my opinion, before Mahomes, Rodgers was the best quarterback to ever play. It takes time, but very soon. If he's got 3 rings by 2023, he'll be in that conversation. But it's hard to say a guy that's played for 5 years is going to be there. From Danielle from Denmark. What's up across the globe? What do I think of the rumors of Josh McDaniels to the Eagles? I think it's a freaking miserable hire if they do that. Schematically, Josh McDaniels runs that like methodical passing game where like you have to be really quick in your reads, and I don't think Wentz or Hurts are going to succeed there. And it seems like this is kind of a, B grade hire or a second option hire, non-priority hire, just kind of a desperation hire, if you will. Eagles are in a rough spot. I don't know who you hire that's better than him, per se, but all right. From Josh, underrated rebuild would be the Eagles. Would you be down to do that? Well, we're doing the Saints rebuild, and then I think Texans and Jets are next. So Eagles probably won't be for a little while. From Will Smithy, given the Deshaun Watson rumors, if you're the Dolphins, how hard would you go after him? We kind of talked about Watson earlier. I would go pretty hard. I would offer. I mean, God, I would give so much to get Watson. I really would. I mean, if the price kept going up, I would give my 2 first rounds this year, first round next year, and the year after that. I would give you the next 3 years of second round picks. I would start throwing in third rounders if I had to. I just think he's the kind of quarterback that is going to elevate everything. And even if you don't have those draft picks, you can build through free agency. The Texans are going to be paying for some of Deshaun's contract. You can add enough pieces through free agency. You can hit on guys later in the draft. And their defense is in place. So, like, it's unconventional, but I would basically forego the right to pick in the first 2 rounds of the draft for the next 3 years, including 2 first-rounders this year, to get Watson. I just think he's that special. And I think a lot of front offices do too, so we'll see if this all happens. But there's the show. I appreciate you guys listening. We didn't suffer through. We got through. We enjoyed our way through some pretty deep schematic conversations there. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I hope you guys check out the stream tonight for the Saints salary cap blow-up rebuild. And share the show, like the podcast, like the video, all that good stuff. I appreciate you guys hanging out, and we'll see you later. Peace.